So the program will begin with readings by our actors here from Philip Gotanda's plays, and will be followed by a discussion between Michael Omi and Philip Gotanda. So I want to thank first Philip and Michael for helping me conceive and create today's program. And I also want to thank Kehinde Koyejo, Stephen Anthony Jones, Lily Tung Crystal, and Brendan Liu, in that order there, on stage for being part of our performance today. So just a brief introduction to Philip and Michael before I introduce them here to set the stage. Philip Kan Gotanda has been a major influence in the broadening of our definition of theater in America. Through his plays and advocacy, he has been instrumental in bringing stories of Asians in the United States to mainstream American theater, as well as to Europe and Asia. He holds a law degree from Hastings College of Law and studied pottery in Japan with the late Hiroshi Seto. Philip is a respected independent filmmaker. His film, Life Tastes Good, was presented at the Sundance Film Festival. He, alongside Michael Sasaki, had a Chinglish version of My Boyfriend's Back, with Joan Chen singing lead on the Hong Kong pop charts before it was banned. Philip is the recipient of a Guggenheim, as well as other honors and awards, and he is currently also a professor of playwriting at UC Berkeley. And our other discussant today, Michael Omi, is the co-author of Racial Formation in the United States, a groundbreaking work that transformed how we understand the social and historical forces that give race its changing meaning over time and place. Since 1995, he has been the co-editor of the book series on Asian American history and culture at Temple University Press. From 1999 to 2008, he served as a member and chair of the Daniel E. Koshland Committee for Civic Unity of San Francisco, at the San Francisco Foundation. At Berkeley, he serves as the Associate Director of the Haas Institute for a Fair and an Inclusive Society. And he is also an affiliated faculty member of Sociology and Gender and Women's Studies. He is a recipient of UC Berkeley's Distinguished Teaching Award, an honor bestowed on only 240 Berkeley faculty members since the award's inception in 1959. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Philip and Michael to kind of set the stage and introduce today's program.
Thank you. First of all, Philip and I would like to thank Sylvia Chang for doing so much work in pulling this event together. I think a round of applause is in order. Also, I want to thank you for coming out in the midst of all the frenzy of Super Bowl weekend, and you chose to spend some time with us here. And it's also interesting to note, which I didn't realize until I was looking at the timeline downstairs, that it's not only the 50th Super Bowl, anniversary of Super Bowl, but it's also the 50th anniversary of the Asian Art Museum, and the start of the Avery Brundage collection at the De Young Museum, which set this all in motion. So, Philip and I first thought that we ought to sort of explain some of the title here, exactly what we meant by racialization, since that may seem, people may seem slightly befuddled by that term as well. And racialization could be thought of as a kind of process by which groups become defined and identified and classified as a race, along with the types of racial meanings that we assign to those groups. We might, for example, want to think about how Muslims today are increasingly racialized as a distinct group and as a terrorist threat. And such an understanding of racialization relies on a concept of race, a conception of race as something that's not fixed, objective, or biologically rooted, but as a social construct, something that varies depending on time and in place. And races, in many respects, have historically been created. James Baldwin once wrote, quote, "No one was white before he, she came to America. It took generations and a vast amount of coercion before this became a white country," end of quote. And we could see these historical transformations very clearly with respect to Japanese Americans. Think about how Japanese Americans in the earlier part of the 20th century to mid-20th century were seen as an economic threat or a subversive group of fifth columnists that needed to be removed from the West Coast of the United States and incarcerated during World War II. From that moment to later on after the war, where Japanese Americans became considered to be a model minority, successfully assimilating into the mainstream of American life. In fact, in 1971, Newsweek boldly proclaimed that the Japanese Americans were, quote, out-whiting the whites, quote. Philip Gotanda's work moves us beyond this sort of prevailing black-white binary of race to really look at and situate the experiences of Asians, particularly of Japanese Americans, in the broader narrative about American identity. And what's great about Philip's work is that he sort of decenters, if you will, a kind of emphasis on whiteness by deeply interrogating what relations between different groups of color look like. How are different groups of color positioned unequally in a racial hierarchy? And what's the meaning of all this? We could think of one example that I was reading about recently. A historian, Natalia Molina, talks about how public health officials in Southern California respectively viewed Mexican and Japanese immigrants in the early part of the 20th century. And what Molina reveals is that Japanese and Mexicans were both considered to be a public health threat, but that Mexicans were considered to be, in Molina's terms, redeemable aliens, while in fact, redeemable immigrants, excuse me, and Japanese were seen as, quote, undesirable aliens, end of quote. And because of that, public health officials argued that Mexican immigrants should receive proper health and hygiene education, but the situation for the Japanese was to exclude them. You had to keep them out. Okay? What's apparent here is that there's a different form of racialization going on, and it shapes how groups are positioned, how groups are treated, how groups view themselves, and the types of relations with individuals from other historically marginalized groups.
The reason why I really appreciate Professor Omi being here is that Michael can help to frame the situation, kind of give it a good contextualization in terms of what the art aspect, the cultural component is. I'd also like to add that I first met Michael about 35 years ago, and we used to play guitar together. This was before he was a professor, before I was a playwright, and he liked country western music. Right? Right, Peter? Okay. Anyway, what I thought we'd do this afternoon is look at three of my works as they fit into this kind of realm of what Professor Omi was talking about. And along with that, I brought all of my friends, musicians and actors who've been introduced to help me with this. We're going to look at three works. The first work is After the War Blues. We're going to read from that. The reason why I selected After the War Blues deals with its subject matter. After the War Blues deals with a historical moment in San Francisco's history, in America's history, that's rather unique. In World War II, Japanese Americans were forcibly removed and incarcerated in the relocation camps. When that happened in San Francisco, there was a vacuum in Japantown. And as a consequence, those people who were living in Western Addition and living in the Fillmore moved into there. And they were predominantly African American, and with them they brought this really vibrant blues and jazz scene. The war ends, Japanese Americans get out of the relocation camps, come back to San Francisco, and want their neighborhood back. And at that point, there is this very interesting moment of intersection between two communities who are truly disenfranchised. African Americans have come back from the war. The soldiers find that they aren't even buried in the same cemeteries. They're losing their jobs at the shipbuilding yards in the Bay Area. Japanese Americans really don't know if they're Americans. They've been imprisoned and they come back. So in this moment of intersection, I like the idea that they rub up against each other. That what do we discover about how they negotiate this? So the play will track Chet and Earl, friends, at the beginning, and their exchange and how they negotiate this. The second piece is Yohen, and Yohen is an earlier work of mine. It's about 30 years old, and it's about an interracial marriage between an African-American man and a Japanese woman. Post-World War II Japan, during the American occupation, and had married and then come back to the States. My interest in this topic had to do with having friends who were the children of these interracial marriages, biracial children. And several of them were my friends, and I got to know their stories. And this situation was prevalent enough that they actually brought back the couples and settled them in certain areas to help with their transition. And the two areas were Oakland and San Pedro, which is where both of my friends, they came from those areas. I became very intrigued by this idea again of the two of them sort of really rubbing up against each other. What would come out in terms of the negotiation, especially in terms of them being in this country, highly racialized? And then the third one is taken from the Jamaican Wash. And this is part of my American adaptation cycle. And this is an experiment I've been working on for a couple years. And what you're going to hear is a Jamaican version of a Japanese-American play that I wrote many, many years ago called The Wash. And what I was interested in doing was adapting from the margins to the margins, as opposed to adapting from the center. And so I approached a variety of theaters in the Bay Area to do this. In other words, take my Japanese-American play and let's adapt it to these other worlds. And all the theaters said no. And then I approached Stephen Anthony Jones, who runs the Lorraine Hansberry Theater Company, my friend, and I asked him about it, and he said, yes, let's try it. And so from that point, we began to talk and to figure out, can this be done? What does it mean? Again, when you're not in the center and margin to margin, you adapt. Can we just take an African-American family? Or in fact, more specifically, what would have some kind of simpatico kind of aspect to it? And we decided that the Jamaican-American family had parallels with the Japanese-American family. And from that point on, we brought in Carl Lumley to work on it, and we did several workshop readings of that. So you're going to hear some of that also. So with that, those three plays we're going to have readings from, and we're also going to add some music from our friend Brendan Liu, who played in one of the original productions. So this is all kind of a live performance, and we haven't, we'll see how it flies, but we're glad you're sharing this with us, and let's see what happens, shall we? Thank you, Michael. Great.
Come to internment camp, soldier at the gate. Come to internment camp, soldiers at the gate. The barracks light up one by one. Come to internment camp, trudging through the snow. No word spoken, trudging through the snow. No word spoken. The railroad track curves and curves, trudging through the snow. Winter night, cold, cold night, a distant lightning flash. Oh, winter night, cold, cold night, a distant lightning flash. Chaos, thunder, wind, rain, distant lightning flash.
I'm walking down Buchanan. Sam, Harry, Ito, guys I grew up with, won't even look at me. Ito spit in my face. He spit in my face. I'm rotting in camp and I get some questionnaire shoved at me. Swear my allegiance to this country and fight for it? I say no. I'm an American. Why the hell I gotta say I'm something I know I already am? I'm supposed to go out and die for this country when it's got everyone I know locked up? What about our rights? Doesn't anyone care? The Constitution is just a piece of paper, means nothing. President signs another piece of paper, and just like that, we're not citizens. You can do whatever the hell you want with us. What was done to us was wrong. All of it. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. And I don't care what Goto, I don't care what the government or anybody thinks. I'll sign any goddamn questionnaire, I'll yell it at Roosevelt, I'll scream it at Earl S. Warren. No. Because it matters. Because it has to matter.
After the war blues, Chet, Earl.
You think only a colored man plays jazz?
Colored man play jazz don't mean jazz colored.
I played for a couple years after the camp, Chicago.
My cousin Avery lived there. That's where the camp at.
I was up near the Oregon border, a place called Tule Lake. Took me out of one camp, threw me in there because I was causing trouble.
Never should have put you in that Tule Lake place, Chet.
Hey, you don't know what I did.
Don't matter. Don't matter. All you folks should have never been took to camps, and you should have never been put in that Tule Lake place. The man don't need to have a reason. He changed the rules to shoot himself. Didn't say it's for everybody's good. Like hell. Especially when it come to wartime, not a civil war. My great-grandpa fought hell. Who want to be a slave? Besides, we gonna get 40 acres and a mule. You see my 40 acres? You see my mule? First World War. Of course they want the colored man. Who gonna do all the dirty work? What we got to show for it, huh? This war. Where my pretty backyard with the swimming pool? Where the hell my martini? Shipyards closed down because we won the war, but guess who the first one to lose his job? Over 1 year now, Earl T. Worthington ain't found steady work. All us colored folks losing jobs. No wonder the music getting meaner.
What happened to go along to get along?
I got some of my mama's blood in me. I just know I don't care what you did. I don't need to know. I understand. And you understand me. Maybe not before. But once you got put in them camps, you know. You see.
Lillian in the office. Leona arrives to give Lillian the rent owed.
See how I wrapped it in clean paper? Crisp new bills. I had to go to the bank to get them. Mrs. Terioka explained things to me. Your ways aren't so special folks can't understand.
All right, well,
Aren't you going to count it?
I wasn't planning to, no.
Yes, you were. Just going to wait till you close the door. Think somehow that'll spare my feelings. I don't understand you people. I know what you're going to do. You know what you're going to do, so just do it. Don't worry about me. Go ahead. It's for this month's rent. I picked up odd jobs.
What about the last 2 months?
Last 2 months? I guess we'll have to talk about that. Find a common solution.
What does Earl think?
I can handle these matters.
Yes, but Chester said he talked to Earl.
Miss Okamura, I don't need a man to manage my affairs.
Okay, all right.
You said something when we came over to see television. Nothing wrong with just in case when it comes to a child. That talk about a child didn't go unnoticed.
Yes?
I got the feeling you might understand the situation we have here, you being sensitive to a child's needs. Bernice can't be without a place to stay. And with us being the only colored folks left in the boarding house when colored people used to run the place.
Chester's family had to borrow money to get this place back.
From coloreds.
Miss Hitchings, we need the money.
I see. Well, you really don't understand the situation.
You think we're doing this because you're not Japanese? So it happens you're not. It's got nothing to do with us needing the rent.
You don't know what I'm thinking, believe me, you have no clue.
Then tell me. Tell me, Miss Hitchings.
You think it just happens to be that way. For coloreds, it can't be like that because when bad stuff happens, you don't just see what's happening to you right then. You see back to your mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. You got a memory of things doesn't even belong to you but connected to you. And you know it doesn't just happen. What happened before and now is all connected.
Things have happened to us, too.
No. I've been through that with Earl. He got no sense of what it means to be colored, and neither do you.
You have no sense of what it means to be Japanese here. You don't know about me.
I do know about you.
You don't know about me. I listened to you. I gave you that courtesy. Okay. We don't know each other. But we're under one roof now, and we both want the same thing. You want to pay the rent, I want you to pay the rent. I know you'll find a job.
I'll find permanent work.
And you can pay a little extra with each month until you make it up.
That's a beginning.
Yeah. Maybe it is.
Leona has dinner prepared for Earl. She covered the plate with a hand towel to keep a fly away. Earl enters.
Whoo! What's this?
Bernice is out playing. Cooked up turnip greens with some oxtails. Sweet potato pie you like?
Now this feel like home. I like it. I like it, Leona. Amen.
When I have more time, I'll cook us up some collards.
Yeah, I hear they hiring down at San Pedro. Thinking maybe I should go on down there and see what's going on. Maybe you can see after Bernice if I do.
You're not gonna let them force us out. They can't. As long as we pay the rent, they can't kick us out. And they can't charge us more for me staying here. I talked to Mr. Mankawa and I told him.
You talked to Chet.
I checked in with the Teraokas and he didn't charge them for their nephew, so he can't charge us. We talked a little.
I wish you wouldn't have done that.
What? Someone's got to talk to them. You won't.
I said I'd take care of it. Well, they was here before us, Leona. All over here, up and down Webster and Fillmore, too, even over South Park. For the war, they own the whole kit and caboodle.
And then they come back, and after they lose the war, and what happens? Colored folks get thrown out, Japs get to move in. That's just like it's always been, but it doesn't mean it's right. We got a little girl to think of, and we can't and shouldn't be moving all over.
Don't call them Japs. They aren't Japanese.
What are they then?
Well, they aren't Japs, okay?
You could have fooled me. They speak Japanese, they eat Japanese, they kick us out and move in Japanese. I think they're Japanese.
The man locked them up.
It doesn't matter these things. Everybody got some pain they have to live with. And Lord knows no one's got more pain than colored folk. And that includes your Jap, Oriental friends. So they've been locked up 3-4 years. So what? That ain't pain. I got a lifetime of pain. 3-4 years, that's a walk in the park compared to our pain. Japs don't know nothing about pain.
Leona, now you can think and feel anything you want, but when you in this place, you don't say that word. You just like them fools out front of the fishbowl yelling things at Chet. All this none of your business anyway, you just visiting.
Visiting?
I can take care of Bernice myself.
Well, how you gonna do that? You don't even have a job.
I took care of her before, I could do it now.
Yeah, but Bessie's back in Mississippi and left you with Bernice.
Let's not talk about Bessie, okay?
She's always was no good, ever since we was little. And she always had an eye for the boys. So she a little pretty, more as of a stray cat. Boys always like that when a girl's high yella. Don't matter even if she acts like a tramp.
That's enough, Leona.
Why do you defend her? She run off on the two of you.
Shut up! Please. I heard enough. It's my place. She my wife. She run off on me.
Why did you stop playing?
You're on the road, share everything, all sleeping in one room. You get to know each other. One guy, Sonny, we didn't hit it off. Kept telling me, you don't belong here, Jap. Finally, we got into it. I got kicked out of the band.
What happened to Sonny?
He didn't get kicked out. As I was leaving, he said, go play with the white boys. It's easier.
Years they lock you up. And now you standing there defending that white boy over me?
It's got nothing to do with boys' race.
It's got all to do with race. Everything's about race. What they done to you, they've been doing to us for a long time. Can't you see that? We on the same side of the fence. But maybe you know that. Maybe that's what this is all about.
What are you saying, Earl?
I ask myself, what you doing on that side of the door holding a gun in my face? And now I think I know. Leona right all along.
Earl, what the hell's wrong with you? Don't go measuring me like you do white folks.
You got the gun, you the landlord. Well?
If it's not colored, it's got to be white. Is that it?
Because that's all there is, as far as I know.
Look at me, Earl. Look at me, Earl. I'm standing right here. Can't you see me? Look. Look!
I'm a colored man, Chester. That's all I know. Winter night, cold, cold night, a distant lightning flash. Winter night, cold, cold night, distant lightning flash. Chaos, thunder, wind, rain, winter night. Come to internment camp, soldier at the gate. Come to internment camp, soldier at the gate. A dusty white road, cicadas cry, 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 and cry.
I believed in this country. I mean, who wouldn't? Mom and Pop here, come here, can't speak the language, don't know the customs, and it welcomes them.
Sure, it's not all fun and games, but it's a hell of a lot better than eating grubs in the boondocks of Hiroshima. They work hard, get a boarding house, and they prosper. They're happy. Boys' Day, Oban dancing, New Year's, we pound mochi. And me, I'm digging it. Tad and me go to the movies Saturday morning, see what Buster Crabbe is up to, then sneak into Seal Stadium to watch the DiMaggio brothers. About the 7th inning, we get hungry. So we hightail over to Black Point, we trap crabs off the pier and bring it all home so Mom can cook them up and we all sit around the table stuffing our faces. Tad and me use our fingers, dipping the meat in butter and show you. We eat 3 bowls each of hot, steamy rice, and we feast and feast till Tad and me, we can't move. Pop has to loosen his belt, and Mom laughs and laughs.
Excerpt from the Jamaican Wash, Naomi. When Thomas died, right after, I started taking the bus to work. I had a car, I could drive. It was easier to drive. I took the bus. For 25 years, you go to sleep with him, wake up next to him. He shaves while you're showering, comes in from the yard all sweaty. Then he's gone. No more Thomas in bed. No more the smell of aftershave and the towel you're drying off with. No more sweaty Thomas coming up and hugging me. I had a car. I took the bus. I missed men's smells. I missed the smell of men. Every morning, I would get up and walk to the corner and take the bus, and it would be full of all these men going to work, and it would be full of all these men coming home from work. And I would sit there, pretending to read my magazine. Soap. Just washed skin. Aftershave lotion. Sweat.
Esther's apartment. Samuel and Esther are in bed. Both are propped up. Samuel intently watching TV and Esther peering at the TV over the magazine she holds in front of her. Samuel keeps switching the channels with his remote control. Each time Esther starts to settle into a program, Samuel switches the channel and causes her to jerk her head from the shock.
Samuel. Samuel. Could you please keep it on 1?
Oh, I'm sorry. Which one? This one? How's this?
Fine, fine. That's fine. Samuel. I don't feel good. I think something's wrong with me.
What? What? You want me to call Doc Phillips?
No, no.
You have a fever, headache? What's wrong?
No, nothing like that. I'm too happy.
What?
I used to feel like this as a kid, I think.
You feel too happy?
When you're a kid, you get ice cream. And remember how you feel? Happy, right?
Yeah.
But you eat it up and it's gone. Or you eat too much and you throw up. This just goes on and on.
You mean us? Yes. But this a little different than ice cream, don't you think?
Of course, of course.
What about with Charles? Didn't you go through this with him? I mean, in the beginning, when you first met, when you got married.
No, it wasn't like that. You know how they say there's no such thing as an accident? That you really wanted it to happen, so it did. I don't think I really cared for Charles, not the way he cared for me. There was someone else who liked me in St. Anne, and I liked him too. I married Charles. Something's wrong with me, huh? Now you make me feel too happy. I don't like it. It makes me unhappy.
There's nothing wrong with you.
Was she in a lot of pain? Your wife towards the end in the hospital.
Mary just slept all the time. No. Not too much. After about 2 weeks, she went into a coma. That was it. You scare me, you know that? You scare the hell out of me. I don't want to go through that again. I told myself never, ever again. Dead is better than feeling that kind of pain. But this, I don't know. To get a second chance. Nothing good about growing old. You spend all your time taking medicine and going to the doctor so you won't die. The rest of the time, you spend going to funerals of your friends who did die, and they were taking the same medicine and seeing the same doctors. Look at us. Here we are, at our age, in bed together, not even married. Can you imagine what the kids are thinking?
We're not doing anything wrong.
Of course I know. But when I really think about what we are doing, it embarrasses the hell out of me.
I scare you half to death, and you make me feel so good. I feel awful.
This is an excerpt from Johan. Sumi James.
You don't know a thing about this boy.
He's a good kid, Sumi.
I don't know. I've never met him.
He's not like the other one. This kid wants help.
So did the other one. Only you were too drunk, and I had to break up the fight.
Jesse's a good kid. He's different. And so am I now. He wants to meet you. How about when I come? Just for dinner, I'll bring him.
For a whole summer? What about his own parents? I thought you said he has parents?
It's okay. She said it was okay. He stays at the shelter full time now anyway. He can't stay with his mother. He gets into trouble. He's not Japanese, right? Sumi? Isn't that it?
You don't know a damn thing about
Gotta
this
be
kid.
Japanese, Japanese,
No,
Japanese.
that's not it. What are you? It's not that at all. Does Jesse come from a good family?
Sumi, what the hell is this good family crap? Jesse doesn't have a real family. If you don't want me to keep him for the summer, just say so, okay? Just say so. Sumi, I wanted kids. You know that. I wanted my own kids, lots of them.
I was sick.
You could have tried after we got back here if you wanted to.
I had high blood pressure.
If you didn't want kids, why didn't you just tell me in the beginning?
Did you want me to get sick?
Then it would have been different, Sumi.
Did you want me to have a
I would have
stroke?
known I could live with that.
I've always loved you. With you, I could breathe again. I laughed again. I did things I couldn't do before, say anything I wanted to, things that would shock a Japanese man. But with you, it was okay. And I could tell you liked me, even though I was divorced. You liked me.
What are you talking about?
But when we came to the States, I saw how people looked at us.
Sumi, why are you talking about this now? What does this have to do with Jesse?
They told me how it was when you marry someone who isn't white. If you're married to a white GI, you get treated different.
Shit.
I didn't believe it. But I saw how people looked at us.
You ever notice how black women look at me, Sumi? Because I'm with you? Whoa. This nigga think because he got him this Oriental thing, his shit don't stink. So we both get looked at funny. That's the way it is. So what's the big fucking deal? And what's that got to do with anything? We were talking about Jesse and me wanting kids.
I come from a very proud family. My father was from samurai.
Oh, you're family again. A good Japanese samurai family. Bullshit. Hardly even lived in Japan. You lived in Manchuria, for God's sakes.
We came from a samurai line that dates back to the Takeda clan.
Your father ran a fucking lumber mill in Manchuria, and he was ripping off the Chinese people left and right. They hated him. Why shouldn't they hate you? It's their country, and the Japs come and make them work for your father like slaves. It's their goddamn country.
Okay, yes, they spit on us. When my father led us to the train, the Chinese villager all lined up and spit on us. But my father, still proud, still strong.
My father built something. I came from a samurai family. We had the biggest home in Manchuria.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what's inside. What Papa felt inside, what I feel inside. What I want a baby to feel inside.
Nah, it's about something else.
It's not, James.
You not wanting a baby, it's about something totally different.
It's not,
then
James.
What? What is it?
I can live with how people look at you. But what I can't accept is how you look at yourself. You believe it, accept it. I wanted my baby to feel pride, my pride.
What? Accept it? What the? Jesus fucking Christ. What the hell do you know about my pride, huh? You don't know shit. You don't know shit about what you're talking about. Grow up in some rich Japanese family.
You were different. You were different.
How?
You were. I could see. That's the man I loved, the one I looked up to, that man. You were proud. So proud. Just like
That
Papa.
was in Japan.
When we got back, I could see the difference. And then I understood.
You shit.
What?
You shit. All these years, if you didn't like being married to a nigga, why
No,
didn't
James,
you just
that's
say
not
so?
it. You don't understand.
Leave! Get out! You know something? I didn't like being stuck with a fucking Japanese princess. So polite and so proper in Japan. But once we get stateside, boom! I don't like cleaning, I don't like cooking, complain, and everything has to be Japanese. Goddamn everything. I'm up to my eyeballs in Japanese. And I can't help if you don't like what I am. I'm not gonna apologize for it. Jesus, this is what I fucking am. This is America. I'm a black man, and this is where I live. It ain't always pretty, but it's home. And what you see here in front of you is all there is, baby. Not what you thought you saw 37 years ago in Nagoya. What I went through, what I was feeling, I don't know. Walking down the street, I just felt strong. Like I could say anything, do anything, and it was okay. Nobody was gonna jump all over my butt like this huge weight on me was lifted off. And just something like walking, swinging my arms, kicking my legs up. It felt so good, so good. I was walking. I wasn't walking and watching to see how other people were reacting to me walking. No. I was just walking. Me. Swinging my arms, kicking my legs, strutting my stuff. He doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't real.
Then what am I doing here? Who have I been married to for all years, James?
Fucking princess looking down her nose at me.
After 37 years married to you and putting up with your crap. And your crap has nothing to do with your color, believe me. I wanted to leave in the beginning, and the other Japanese wives on the base. I was from Manchuria. I was so lonely. Sometimes I would just pull all the shades and cry all day waiting for you to come home. And sometimes you didn't come home, James. When we moved to LA, I felt good. Finally, I could feel at home. But they looked down their noses at me, the Nisei. I married a GI. And on top of that, he's Kuro-chan. I was so lonely. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home so bad.
Sumi,
Yes.
is that why you didn't want the baby? Because you didn't want to have my baby?
Don't say
black
things like that!
Baby?
You didn't hear me. It's about pride. Pride, not color.
I think you're getting them mixed up.
I didn't even know what this color thing was. Black, white. You were the Americans. You were the victors.
Your pride changed into something else.
I was sick. The doctor said so. James, what are you? I don't know. I mixed up. Did you want me to die for your baby? Is that what you wanted?
You wouldn't have died.
Is that what you wanted?
It's difficult to switch gears after such a moving performances, I must say.
I know.
Maybe we could have another just brief acknowledgement to the performers. That was really terrific. Thank you.
That's Stephen Anthony Jones, Kehinde Koyejo, and then Lily Tung Crystal, and Brendan Liu on the horn.
But we will switch gears. We'll try to.
Let us try shifting gears.
You know, a running theme in After the War Blues is about groups of people who share a space. You know, like in this case, the boarding house in Japantown.
Right.
And what does it mean for people to share spaces like Japantown in the Western edition right after the war?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's just something about that moment that is so unique where two communities, both of whom feel very, very disenfranchised, overlap, and therein, again, it's like what's left over. They have this one kind of community, and each of them finally has kind of their own home, and then they find out that, in fact, they have to kind of fight over it in terms of, is it my home? You know, within the context of dominant culture. And so for me, the idea, again, of there's shared space, shared public space, is shared private space. In the case of Johan, it's very intimate space. And in this particular instance, for me, the idea is it's when you share space, when you have to share space, when you're forced to live in each other's spaces, is when things percolate to the surface. Good, not so pretty things, ugly things. And for me, that's sort of where we find out what we're made of. And so the shared spaces idea comes from the conflicts, you know, the humanism that grows out of those moments when in your space is where you live, and you have to share that space where you live, where you breathe, where you eat, with somebody else. That's where you sort of really begin to touch upon, like, I think, very, very deep human themes. And that's why I like to work in that area.
You know, in the Jamaican Wash, you talked about, and you prefaced this earlier too, about how you're trying to translate from the margins to the margins.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, what do you have to be attentive to in doing that? And also, how translatable are things across cultural contexts for you?
Well, what I'll do is I'll go back to sort of the origins of this, and I'll try to work my way back. So remind me if I forget from whence I come. The original idea came from several things, and one was about 15 years ago, I got a phone call from a friend who lives in Mexico. And she said, Philip, I just wanted to tell you I'm watching Spanish television down here in Mexico, and your film, The Wash, there's a film version of The Wash, a Japanese-American cast. She said, the film version of The Wash was on Spanish television here in Mexico, and it was dubbed. And I thought, what? Why in the world would they be playing The Wash, an English film about a Japanese-American family in San Jose? Why would they be showing it on Spanish television? And it got me thinking, what's going on in terms of, like, again, something happening that's similar in the bed of these two cultures. Then and this is there's several other things too. One was when The Wash was originally done in San Francisco many years ago, Danny Glover, who's a friend of several of us, was in the back, and as soon as it was over, he said, man, this could be my family. And I thought, okay. And then the final one is, I was watching this movie, Sense and Sensibility, and I was watching it. It's a film, beautiful film. I think some of you know it. And what I noticed about the film was something is not right. That in fact, as I watched this film with an English cast, that something different was happening. It wasn't bad, it was just different. And then I realized what it was is Ang Lee's directing this film. And that what Ang Lee has sort of put into this English film was a different kind of space, rest notes, you know. And that when people speak, he allows a little more space than is normal. And as a consequence, your experience of the material was changed. It was something you weren't aware of, and yet it was organic, and yet it was still what it was, but it was different. So all those things kind of conspired to the point where at some point I thought, and this also related to my interest in translations, translating material, and also the idea of a classic. What constitutes a classic in American theater? And when you adapt, you normally adapt from the center. You'd adapt an Ibsen, even a Miller, you adapt Shakespeare, you know. That's fine, but why do you always adapt from the center? And what if you adapted from the margins to the margins? So that idea came to me, conspired with all those other things floating around. And I approached several theaters, as I mentioned. Finally, I approached Stephen at Lorraine Hansberry Theater Company. He said, let's do it. And it got me thinking of, I should make this part of a bigger project. And so it became the American Adaptation Cycle. So the first part of it is with Lorraine Hansberry Theater Company, adapting to a Jamaican family. which we found through 2 workshops, adapted well. There are things sort of like in the original was stinky food, stinky food, like they're all comparing stinky foods. And we thought, when we were doing the workshop, what is sort of the analogous thing in terms of West Indian cultures? And we came up with hot peppers, right, Stephen? And what was the real hot pepper? The Scotch bonnet. Again, but more than food, we were trying to find, thicker, meatier things that allowed us to sort of to translate and to adapt. I'm also working with Torange Yagiazarian from the Golden Thread Theater Company. It's a Middle Eastern American theater company. And we talked and we decided what might adapt is an Armenian American family to a Japanese American family. So I'm working on that one. And then I'm also, working in trying to find somebody, a Latino American. I thought I had somebody to also try an adaptation. And again, this is an experiment. What it is or what we come up with, I'm not quite sure. I do know that in the workshops, the idea of working with actors who are aware of what we're doing, also trying to be conscious of the fact of what is proprietary, who is in the center in relationship to the material. It's always a continual sort of negotiation. And so I'm curious about what happens during the process. I'm curious as to what happens with the audience when they're both aware of the history of the piece, and then also if they're not aware of the piece. And if there are other things that sort of float to the surface in the material that would otherwise not be experienced. What that is, what you would call it, I don't know. But I do know also there are issues, again, of what is proprietary, what is blind casting, employment issues with my Asian American acting friends. There are a great many issues. But it is something I really, really decided I wanted to try. And so I've been working on it with a variety of theaters. And hopefully in the next couple of years, you'll see the fruits of that, and that you'll have a chance to experience whatever that is. To me, means adapting from the margins to the margins, and how well that can work or can't work, again, like knowing what can adapt and what can't. Because ultimately, it can't be just food, can't be just superficial things. It has to be something that each community, as they take the work and embrace the work, somehow are willing to kind of, take into their bodies. And so far, certainly in terms of the Jamaican American version, so far so good. And we're hoping that we can do a production soon. That's a long answer to a short question.
I'm thinking, there's this current controversy involving the Academy Award nominees, as well as the composition of the voting members of the Academy. And a lot of it focuses a lot, too, on whether or not our general receptivity to works that don't have a white protagonist in it. And I think you once told me that you had a hard time getting Johann produced precisely because it didn't feature.
Yeah, the play Johann, which we did a reading from, I originally wrote, it's a very old play of mine. I wrote it about almost 30 years ago. And I was interested in this area. And it was commissioned by a very well-known theater, a regional theater, and they had taken to my work and said, Philip, we'd like you to write a play for us. And I thought, cool. I got this idea about an interracial marriage in my head, so I wrote this play. And then I sent it to the theater company. They're in the South. And I didn't hear anything for a while, and then finally I got back a little form letter which said, thank you very much, Philip, we're not interested. That was it. And I thought, wow, this is a theater company that was interested in me, wanted to know what I was doing, and I wrote this piece that was really important to me, and that was it. Nothing. Well, the play had a lot of other sort of things happen to it, but about 10 years later, I got a phone call, and it was from the man who had commissioned it from the same theater. And he called me up and he said, hey, Philip, we came across this new play of yours. Somebody sent it over to us, and we really like it. And we really want to do it, And I said, well, what play is this? And he said, Johann. And I thought, this is a joke, right? This guy is joking, but he wasn't. He was absolutely serious that, somehow things had changed, the world had changed, the theater had changed. So as a consequence, now what they could not see, what they could not figure out what to do with, was now relevant. But I do think it gets back to this issue too of who's in the center, and what is marketable at times in terms of at least American theater, And if you don't have a white character in the center, I think it's difficult. But if you have, all the protagonists are from the margins, it's a hard thing for, I'll only talk in terms of what I know, theater companies to figure out sometimes. There isn't a great deal of material, but even then, the idea at the center, you have a black man and an Asian woman is still not an easy sell, again, because on some level, who's in the center is important. And that's why you see, friends who I know I've worked with who will write characters who, in terms of, this isn't the case now, but it used to be, kind of the strategy. You put a white character in the center, and then you have your Asian character, or person of color, sort of orbiting or sort of in conjunction, and it's a way to, in kind of subversive way to allow your work to get over. I know that sounds very kind of sad, but it is an awareness of how the system works and also how to get your works over, knowing that.
Race and racial meanings are pretty highly gendered. I'm going to give a shout out to my colleague, Evelyn Cano-Glenn, who's here, who's written extensively on this as well. How do you give voice to that connection between race and gender in your own plays? And is there a real...
You got me looking at
We have to bring Abby up here.
Yeah. One more time again.
Well, it's sort of like, you're pretty attentive
Yes.
to issues around
Yeah.
gender. You have to write these parts, too. What's the kind of ways in which you think about the relationship of race and gender? Or what does that look like in your own work?
I'm actually kind of stymied. I don't know how to answer that. I am really, I'll say this. I feel, and other people can be critical of me, but I'm very comfortable writing female characters. And I always have been, I'm not sure why. I grew up in a family of all males and extended males, and but for some reason, if I'm to choose a protagonist, I would choose an Asian woman, and it would be an Asian woman or a woman, a female person of color, and ultimately an Asian woman, whom I feel the strongest kind of connection to. This is sort of the internal aspect of trying to connect to a character as you write it. I'm very aware of sort of issues of class relationship, how gender plays into those things, and I try to be very attentive to them when I write characters, especially period characters too. The idea that if I write about a Japanese American character in the 40s, what kind of language would they use, and would it be gender specific in terms of their Japanese, their English? Also the types of words they would use, if they're sort of from a certain region, if they're from a certain era, and then how they sort of relate to each other. Again, it's depending on generations. In terms of Japanese American characters, some Asian American characters, you can be very specific about gender, about generation, about what age, and sort of in keeping with that, how they might behave. If that behavior is in keeping with it, or if the behavior is at odds with it, it just can't be arbitrary. The characters can never be arbitrary. It always has to be specific. There has to be a reason for it. So whatever she does, it's in relationship to knowing what was the kind of convention of the time. Again, a long answer to sort of perhaps.
Sounds good. Let me just ask you one last question. Then we should create some space and open it up for the audience to ask you questions as well. And I'm trying to do a little bit of a leap to the special exhibit here in certain ways,
Yes.
where we have the ways in which artists in the West have been sort of influenced by Japanese art, and particularly how they've taken it, stylistic elements of it, or refashioned it. And there's always this question about how cultures either share or appropriate each other's culture. After the War of Blues, obviously, there's a lot of focus on jazz, which is a uniquely American and black musical genre. So what does it mean to respectfully share culture, and when does it sort of devolve maybe into something else with respect to appropriating, theft, or sort of the ways in which people take it on and refashion it for themselves?
Kind of co-opt it and
or co-opt
refashion it.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of the backdrop of the play After the War Blues. It takes place at a period when the music scene is going from swing to bebop, and it's going from segregated bands to integrated bands, just at the same time this whole story is taking place. And the idea is Chet has been playing with black groups. He's interested in American jazz. He thinks black is cool. He thinks Japanese is uncool. Black is cool, colored is cool, jazz is cool, Japanese is uncool. And that for him at that time period, he is playing with black groups. As a consequence, I loaded that character with having some kind of sense of, he has shared space with these people, this other community, so that he's positioned differently. But again, the idea of, whose music is it? Ultimately, I also use that to be the kind of the ground where they cannot sort of overlap and meet in the middle, in terms of one of the band members. It's a trick, I can't answer it, so as a consequence, can't write the characters either. I write the characters up to that point where they're struggling with how do we overlap this. Can a Nisei musician actually play jazz? Can a Nisei musician be authentically playing jazz in a black group in the 1940s, Or in fact, is he incapable of it because he doesn't have the history, he doesn't have the cultural sort of specificity to ultimately, with authenticity, give expression to this musical form, this idiom. It's like it's a question that sort of floats around all the time, and I sort of put it into the play knowing that I can't answer it, Because basically the black character is saying to Chet, he says, you don't belong here. Go play with the white boys.
Right.
It's easier. And that says to Chet so many things, like he doesn't have it, he'll never have it, he can't. But in the white bands, it's easier. Dude, go play with them. You don't have to be as good. You don't have to be doing authentic jazz. And that's sort of where I kind of leave the play.
Good enough. Thanks, Philip. Let's open it up for any comments or questions from the audience. I ask that you be fairly succinct so we can take several. And speak loud, and I'll try to repeat your question as well.
They have microphones here.
Oh, they do. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I really enjoyed all of the plays that were performed. You spoke of the translation of these plays that were kind of getting these cultural values across to different cultures. And it reminded me of, I read how apparently Fiddler on the Roof is very popular, or was popular with audiences in Japan. Like it struck a chord with them for... and it's, a show about Orthodox Jews being oppressed by the Tsar, or the government, or whichever. And sorry, I'm rambling. My question is, in the first play, you show how there's the character Leona who, she's been through so much pain in her life, and she kind of refuses to recognize, or doesn't want to recognize, the pain of Japanese Americans. So my question is, what do you think of why some people kind of, who have been through so much pain, kind of won't recognize this pain in other cultures that they can't kind of identify with themselves? Sorry.
Yeah, I know that's that's a difficult one, and also kind of it's right there in front of us. I think basically it's. Again, my hesitancy is I don't pretend to go into anybody's body, into anybody's history and say, I understand your pain. It's sort of beyond me to be able to, in very specific terms, know what, in my case, being an Asian, a black person experiences in America. I don't pretend to, you know. What I try to do is I try to do as much, this is getting a little away from it, but the idea, I try to do as much homework as I can, get to know the information in my body, and then work in a manner that allows the play and the information and the characters to grow substantially in that collaboration. So, which is to say, in terms of writing black characters, being an Asian man, now it's reasonably okay to do that now, but 10 years ago, 15 years, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that was something you didn't do. You know, people didn't write other characters. And so when I first did Johan, though I was enthusiastic about it, this was like 30 years ago, I was really hesitant for the play to be done because I didn't feel it would be received appropriately, and there would be a question as to the inauthenticity of the black character, and that my sort of attempt to even write a black character. Even though in the development of it, I was very careful. We had you have black actors and you have black directors working on it to help me develop it. It was to that point that it was supposed to be done at Berkeley Repertory Theater, and it was announced in the season, but I pulled it. Because I just didn't feel comfortable. And again, it's this idea of can you ever know another person's, pain, and can you ever know a community other than your own, their sort of historical pain? And I don't pretend to. What I try to do in writing these characters is work with someone like Stephen Anthony Jones, to work with Kehinde, so that it isn't my burden. The idea is rather to help me to develop these characters, to make them authentic, so that they can embody the history of that community as best as one can when one isn't of the community. So that was another long explanation. Stephen, did I sort of hit?
Well, remember Johan was how we met.
Yes, yeah.
And we were workshopping.
Oh, yeah.
And we workshopped it for a while, and then I think you stopped it. Because of what you said earlier in your remarks. You were uncomfortable. And as fate would have it, I don't know what, 20 years later?
Yeah.
I don't know how much time passed. We ended up
Doing it.
being in Johan.
Yeah.
But that was how Philip and I met, when he was beginning to write Johan and struggling with that very issue. And I can remember conversations, and I said, no, it's fine. And then you could kind of see Philip thinking, you're just saying.
He's being nice.
We have a question over there. Yes.
Yeah, hi. So, my question is, Philip, when you were doing the Jamaican Wash, what were the surprises, and what did you think about, so what did translate, and what surprised you in terms of what the differences were?
Well, to kind of point to sort of one where we struggled to figure out if there was anything that was analogous in terms of Jamaican history and Japanese American history, was the idea of in the wash, the daughter marries a black man, and that is sort of the ultimate taboo in that family. And as a consequence, the father, the patriarch, disowns the daughter. So we were trying to figure out, in terms of this Jamaican family, what would be the sort of parallel to that. And at first, one of them was, it ultimately became the idea of, and it came from Carl Lumley himself and his own family. He was raised in Minneapolis, and he tells the story about his father. He comes from a Jamaican American family, and his father, very strict Jamaican patriarch, said to him, Carl, and I think Carl will allow me to say this, but you can go out and you can play with folks, but I don't want you hanging with the black kids because they're lazy, they don't care about school, they're not good. So Carl, don't hang around with the African American, the black kids, so you can go out and play now. And that, to me, sort of like, we thought it was such a kind of interesting, specific way to look at, in the Jamaican wash, what the patriarch gets upset with in terms of the daughter when she marries out, that she marries an African-American man, you know, and that was something that the patriarch found unacceptable, or it kind of allowed a kind of parallel sort of conflict to occur in the family. And so that's part of like a discovery that was made and found during the course of doing this kind of adaptation.
Hey. Hello, my name is Matthew Mock. I'm so pleased to be here, Michael and Philip, so honored. I find some of your pieces, and thank you for the actors and Sylvia, to be so psychological in so many different ways. In fact, your plays, Ballad of Vachiko, The Wash I use for a family violence class that I teach. I'm here with 25 of my graduate students in psychology because they're learning about relationships and also historical trauma. Yeah. And I find that so much being a part of your plays, talking about the Japanese internment camp experience, as well as, of course, African Americans, legacy of slavery, talking about Native Americans in terms of legacy, is that this idea about historical trauma, which, by the way, I think about also in The Wash, because The Wash, it's about the fellow who also, what happened to him in the internment camp and the jealousy that he has. And one, I'm curious how that shows up in the other plays going across many cultures. But then going back to historical trauma, I had this question of, when your plays are shown to audiences, younger, maybe in composition, maybe in older, and I mean that demographically, do they receive it differently, I'm curious, or do they understand this historical legacy of trauma? Do they sort of, I'm not sure about it, or do they really say, oh yeah, it really resides now, even in my generation, as why my parents told me, but I never got it until you showed it in these relationships with, in your plays. There's a question in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah. Well, in terms of I can speak in terms of my students. You know, the students, first off, it's not homogeneous. So you have all different types of students and with different backgrounds coming to one of my classes and with us collectively studying certain works. So if you're like a fourth, fifth generation mixed race Japanese American, you know, your interest, at least I found, you know, your interest in being Japanese American with that sort of, with the history behind it, or considering that important, is almost not even considered. It's just sort of like that's just out there, and I think it's linked to me way far away, but there's no historical trauma that I can think of. I mean, there's just this moment in history that, you know, my dad and my dad's dad talked about, but that's about it. And for me, though, the idea was that even though I was once one generation removed from the camp, my parents were interned, but I wasn't, or incarcerated, I felt there was this psychic moment that happened en masse to a community of people. And when that happens, it embeds in the culture, in the community, in the people, a kind of psychic scar en masse that, because it's done to everyone, it also affects collective behavior. And so for me, I've written about this idea always of this kind of scar that, you know, they've been embedded with, and that it has affected all our behaviors as a consequence. And, you know, people have examined sort of out-marriage rates and a variety of different issues as to, you know, is that in any way related to some of the issues of the internment camps, which is, I'm not sure. But I do know the idea of the scar or the traumatic event is sort of not existent in certain generations of Asians. It just isn't. So they take the material and they kind of understand sort of the racism aspect of it, you know, but it's very difficult to sort of kind of, I think, to embody or understand how a nation can do this to their own people, you know, collectively, and how that might damage one's sense of self as an American and how one fits into America, because that's what happened in terms of my own mind. But that, I don't find that to be the case. Many of them are sort of 1.5ers. Some come from China, come from Korea. Many are, Chinese, Japanese, Southeast Asian Americans. And though they can identify with the material, I mean, to actually, in their bodies, have embodied something like that, an event that they can relate to, I don't find that it's there. Could be wrong. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Something that I love about your plays, Mr. Gotanda, is that they tell the untold stories of, or undertold stories of different non-white racial groups interacting. And I'm curious, both of you, if you have any thoughts or observations about particularly Asian and Black communities, how they're interacting today, especially under the Black-led Black Lives Matter movement. Any thoughts or observations about those kind of interracial relations today?
Michael, is that something you've been handling?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is really to also look back and explore the histories of the ways those two groups have maintained contact with each other. I initially grew up in the Western Addition in San Francisco, which is, of course, that space which borders between the African American community along Fillmore and also the Japantown community. And much is sort of lost in the ability to sort of historically reconstruct what those relations were like on an everyday level as well. There's other scholars who have tried to look at these things more broadly too. There's a historian named Scott Kurshige who has a book called The Shifting Grounds of Race, which looks at African American and Japanese relations in Southern California, specifically Los Angeles, from about the beginning of the 20th century on to the war and past the war years. What's really different, I was actually speaking earlier to a group of UC Irvine students who come up. Are you guys still here? Some of the UC Irvine? I don't know if they were. They ran away after my other discussion with them. I think what's as important is to understand persistent forms of kind of social inequality and social justice and issues around social justice. And what does it mean to be allies to one another? So what does it mean to be agents for Black Lives Matter? What does it mean to take up some of these struggles in which one group has been primarily subject to police violence? And how do you translate that, not only into your own experiences, but what does it mean to stand with folks around those issues? And it's very complex in many ways. And why it's complex too, and here I'll try to be brief, is because, historically, groups have been positioned and represented in relationship to each other in very conflicting ways. In many respects, the model minority image of Asian Americans emerged at a particular traumatic, if I could use that word, period of American history where there was a wave of urban rebellions which racked the nation beginning in about 66, 67. And people, including the presidential's own committee on racial disorders, the Kerner Commission, was arguing that the United States was an institutionally racist society, that in fact major institutions were racially discriminatory. And within that current, within that model, other scholars and journalists were trying to assert, no, maybe it's the kind of cultural prerequisites people have. And that, look, Asians have been subject to oppression, but they seem to be successfully integrating into the mainstream of American society. So in many ways, that image itself emerged from a particular historical context. And it was one to say, maybe the problem isn't institutional racism, maybe it's based on what the group culture is, leading to a whole set of things around the culture of poverty, other kinds of ideologies too, which really influence a lot of government policies and practices. The point I want to suggest about this is that you got to be always attentive to how you're currently positioned in this racial hierarchy. Because in many ways, your location is totally contingent and relationally defined by where other groups are at. And in doing so, you sort of have to turn more outward to see how racial stratification as a whole is happening in the United States, to understand the ways in which groups are often pushed into conflictual forms of relationships, but also what does it mean to transcend it? What does it mean to be allies for each other?
Any other questions from the audience?
Thinking about the concept of translating an artistic work from the margins to the margins, how do you like to work there in terms of collaborating with other people? Yeah, how do you like to work?
You know what, it kind of varies with each of the projects. So with the Jamaican Wash, it's, I am the main writer of it. But I would choose not to be the main writer of these works. So with the Armenian American family, the woman, Toran Jagiazarian, she'll be the main writer. I might work with her, but I would choose not to ever be in sort of the fore. Rather, it should be another writer from that particular community, and I might just step back. That would be my ideal preference. So.
Okay, so I want to say thank you again to Michael, Philip, and all our actors, and thank you everyone for being so patient with our first audio issues. And but thank you very much for attending the program. And can we all give a round of applause to?
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.